Welcome to Radiant Souls, Imperfectly Perfect podcast, a place for self-discovery, self-mastery, and spirituality. Welcome, I am Sequoia Raven Moon of Luminous Life Journey and Sacred Fire Dance. This is episode 1. Today's topic, shine your light. What on earth does that mean exactly? I mean, we know what it means. Shine your light. We hear it all the time. Step out and be seen. Step out and be heard. Shine your light. Offer your gifts. Be who you authentically are. We hear this all of the time, and it means different things for different people. It's also not always that easy, right? Shining your light requires bumping up against whatever the light is exposing. This can be limiting beliefs, core wounds, fears, doubts, habitual actions that are not serving our highest good or others' highest good. All of that is going to be exposed. The more we shine our light out, it also is inherently being shined within. Therefore, all of our own internal processes are being exposed. It makes us feel vulnerable and many times draws a lot of conscious light workers, spiritual people, conscious business owners to abandon their mission because they don't have the time, desire, support to go into that deep work. Because there is no way around it. In order to shine our light requires us to actually do that deeper work. Otherwise, we're casting a shadow. In order to be a pure, clear, true light, we've got to do that deep inner work. We got to show up in integrity. And this requires being vulnerable at times, right? That's why I said this is an imperfectly perfect podcast. And that is going to be the premise that I build this whole structure upon. It is imperfectly perfect. There are going to be mistakes. There are going to be things said that are going to make no sense or are going to be triggering, all of it. That's okay. It's a conversation. It's a thought process. Sometimes we have these ideas or thoughts in our head, perhaps a belief, and then we start to talk about it and we realize that it doesn't have the same kind of power or potency that it does when we keep it contained within. It seems to gain momentum and gain power and begin to take control and take over in the driver's seat when we keep it contained within. But when we start to talk about it and share it, sometimes we realize it's really not that important or big of a deal or really that worthy of engaging or putting any energy into. So, within the topic of shining your light, I want to share with you a story. This story spans over time. Where it began, I can't quite pinpoint, but I am going to take you to the marker upon which I can place it and trace it from this moment of time. I had a dream. I was on an island. There was this river flowing through. And on the other side, not that far away, I could see another landmass. In the dream, it felt like I was with somebody and that person very quickly, with ease, without hesitation, went into the water and swam across the current to the other side. A part of me thought, I don't have a swimming suit. So I turned around and went into the town that was behind me on this island I was standing on and began to go through this series of experiences trying to find the right suit. Prior to this dream, I had had this other awareness of needing to clean up the water. This whole story with La Llorona and the polluted river had come up in the worn out animus. So when this dream appeared, it became clear to me that it was an important dream for me to take note of. Because one, in my previous awareness, the river was polluted. In this dream, the river was flowing abundant, full, and clear without obscuration. It was flowing unobstructed. I knew that there was some work for me to do in cleaning up the river, in purifying, in purging, in releasing, to come to that place where I would be standing before a pure, clear river. So here I am coming out of this dream where I was looking for the most perfect suit. In journaling that morning, it came to my awareness, there was a part of me that crossed that river and unobstructed, free, and was able to go. But the part of me that felt like I needed the most important suit, the one that was journaling there that moment, in that morning, I came to the realization that I needed to come to the point where I didn't need a suit, where I was stripped down to bare minimum, just to bare bones, completely free, open, and willing to go into the water and swim across, holding on to nothing. I didn't need anything. There was nothing I was going to need to take with me, right? And it didn't require a suit. It actually just required a willingness to be vulnerable and to go into the water and go. It's all right there. So I share this dream with you. Simultaneously, I had come to a journal where I had activated the journal, and upon it, I had drawn a bridge. I didn't think much about it, but apparently I was having, at this time of this journal, this process of working with the concept of a bridge, bridging, building a bridge, getting the materials to build a bridge, a team that's needed to build the bridge. Just the whole journal was bridge components woven through the whole journal. Recently, now, I have been having, again, visuals of a bridge, but I'm at a different place along this bridge, okay? So over the last week, I start seeing this bridge. I see myself having crossed almost to the other side of the bridge, and I'm standing at the other end of the bridge, and I see that there is just one step before me to the shore that it connects to, right? But it's not connected. And I see what I'm, looking for on the other side of the bridge. So that makes me then turn around and look over the bridge that I've come over, the one that I've built, and I realize that what is before me that I'm looking for is also tied to what I've built already. In looking back over the bridge, I see that also the other end of the bridge, the one that I first built, is also not connected. There's a gap there too. So now you can imagine I'm on a bridge. I have crossed and moved almost to the other end. I've built it as I've been walking across. And I'm now coming to the awareness that the entrance and the exit to the bridge, there is a gap between each, an empty space. So I come to this awareness that I'm on a floating bridge. And I think, okay, well, I'm obviously not going to be able to walk forward over the end of the bridge until I build and fill in that space in the gap. And then I think, okay, well, I won't be able to fill in that gap until I go back to the beginning and look at what I left unfinished and what I did not fill in the beginning gap. Okay, so I meditate there, and then I see this trail leading up to this bridge very vividly. And I track it all the way back to the trailhead, and I track it back to the parking lot, and then I track it back to the drive to get to it, and then I track it back to, the map and wherever that calling, that frequency lives that attracts me and other people to this particular trail, right? And I see, feel, and sense All of these people who are at varying degrees of this particular pathway, some of them are waiting to hear the call. Some of them have not even aware that this trail exists, right? Some of them have heard of the bridge, a great floating bridge, and they want to go to the trail where there's a waterfall and a pure clear flowing river and this floating, beautiful, magical, crystalline bridge. And others have heard of the beautiful, lush greenery along the way. Others have heard of the challenges, the steep switchbacks, the turns, the sharp edges. Everybody's drawn to it for different reasons. Some heard the bird calls, right? Some, it was because they wanted to connect in with nature, or it was a social gathering. They, their friends, and their community thought that they wanted to go walk in nature, commune with nature, and enjoy a stroll together in the peace of the trees, right? Listening to the sounds of the birds, listening to the sounds of the wood hum, and looking and taking in the subtle faces in the trees as they guide them along this path. I saw this whole collection of people at different phases. Some were getting to the parking lot. Some were taking pictures of the trailhead, right? Some are on the bridge. As I see all of these people, I think back along my journey, and I see myself coming to this point along the trail where I entered this trail thinking, there's a bridge. I want to go see this waterfall. I want to go see this. It's a loop. I'm going to end up, walking along and ending up back where the car was parked. So I was lured into it in a way. And I get to this point on this trail where there's a ravine. There's this 1,000-foot drop, a straight edge, a cliff, no way down. There's no bridge. And I'm looking, going, wait, what happened? I don't see any signs of the bridge being washed out. I can't even see the bottom. Like, where am I? What has happened, right? And I think, okay, well, that's frustrating. Like, what am I gonna do, right? There's no option. I've got to turn around and go back. So as I turn around and start to walk back, I'm surprised because there's no return path. Where am I? What has happened? What kind of situation is this? I'm trapped. Panic, 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 freeze. Okay, how am I gonna get out of here? I gotta get out of here. All of the initial reactions start coming up, right? However much time I spend going through that process, right? Probably lots of time, probably years. In fact, I can tell you based on the story that I am sharing with you, it is years. Some seeds take quite a while to nourish, right? And the more we're fighting them in resistance, demanding them to grow within an hour or a day or a week, the more they don't, okay? But the more that we learn to ease back and listen and observe, still ourselves, the more we start to learn how to cultivate the soil, how to nourish the seeds, how they actually naturally germinate, how the natural process, the organic intelligence of nature flows, right? But when we resist and fight that, we push it away, right? We get to points where we think there's a bridge and instead there's a ravine. So I've taken you on this journey to this point where I expected to go see a bridge. And instead, there's this whole posse of people that are traveling the trail also. However, I distinctly feel like I'm the only one standing here at the edge, right? In fact, there's no room on this edge for anyone else. And I realize, okay, where have I come? So once I finally stop and ground in, I realize that the only option is to go through, to go forward. It's trust. I have to trust the process. I'm gonna have to take a step, right? And it's super scary, right? So I do what I do when I'm on a trail and there's a steep down cliff. I get down to the earth. I get on my butt, all of my body connected to the earth, and I start filling around. I'm putting my toe over the edge. I'm also not that comfortable with heights. So my fear in this experience, in this story, has been thoroughly triggered, all right? I'm unsure of heights. I'm now having to fill around on this ledge that I've got myself on, way high up, okay? So I'm filling around and I got long legs, gratefully, right? So I stick a long leg out, right? And it's dangling over there and I'm feeling down. I'm like, is there steps like down the side of this ravine that I'm not seeing that I'm supposed to crawl down, right? No, okay, there's not, right? So there's just open, vast space and what appears to be a ravine. So I stick my leg out into, not down the side of the cliff, but I stick it forward and it bumps into something. And I'm like, wait, what is that? There's nothing out there, right? So I can feel open space, me here, open space, and I feel my foot bumping into something that I cannot see. And I can clearly feel there is a structure there, right? If I can, get a hold of it with my arm and get a foot over there, maybe I can kind of pull myself over and I reach and I feel something. There are some times in life where a leap of faith works. We go with whatever happens, right? That analogy doesn't always totally work for me, right? Sometimes in some circumstances, I am able to take that kind of a risk. In other times, I go at things a little bit more sure-footed. So in this particular situation, the way that I'm describing it, I needed to go more sure-footed. Because one thing that I was not willing to sacrifice was my life. And that was, in this particular analogy, what the fear was. I'm not willing to sacrifice my life in order to find some structure, okay? Not at all. So I was gonna go sure-footed. I was gonna feel my way through. I was being called to trust. So I stuck a foot out, I stuck an arm out, and I start to pull myself over this gap. And I realized that the gap is not actually as big as I thought. It looked like this great ravine. I get myself over and it was like pulling through fog. All of a sudden I see before me the floating bridge. Okay, I'm on the bridge. The first point I want to make here is along this path, for whatever reason you felt like you were called onto it, there becomes a point where you're gonna have to take the step. You're gonna have to take the first step. You're not gonna totally trust it, but you're gonna have to find the most sure-footed way to take that step, to cross that ravine, to step over the gap, because the depth and distance of the gap is an illusion, right? What you are looking for exists, but you've got to take that first step and be grateful for those moments where your return path has been blocked, because it means that you are facing true north and that your guides are not going to allow you to backtrack, right? If you're allowed to backtrack, then you're not ready, right? So that point where your return path is blocked and the only way is through, you're facing true north, especially when the fear gets triggered and you're being asked to trust, you can find the most sure-footed way. You also do not have to do it alone, okay? So now here in this moment, I've had this vision of this bridge, right? I realize it's a floating bridge. I'm distinctly aware of how I came onto this bridge. I'm running a journey called the Illumination journey. And the Illumination journey is something I do multiple times a year that goes from the new moon to the full moon. There are the people who sign up on the Illumination journey get a reading at the new moon, a reading halfway, the bridge reading at the first quarter half moon, and then a full moon reading. In addition, it begins with a new moon ceremony and concludes with a full moon activation ceremony. Okay? So here I am at the one halfway bridge reading point. And I start to have something spark, right? And I love it because all of a sudden the sun is coming out and it's getting brighter right now, which ties into my story here. This very simple desire to write these 7 messages leading up to the full moon come forward. Cross the bridge. Trust the process. The sacred stones are speaking. Listen deep. Respect organic intelligence. Embody your authentic. Shine like the sun and emerge. So I go forward and create visuals for each of those messages and schedule those out for 7 days leading up from the half quarter moon to the full moon. However, I feel something, this calling from within to go look at some photos from this point in time 10 years ago when I visited Takachiho, Japan. So 10 years ago, over a period of 4 years, I spent a lot of time in Japan. I fell in love with Japan. I explored, adventured, traveled. It was the most beautiful, amazing, magical place. I felt like I was at home. I was so grateful for the opportunity to have spent so much time there. And in this one particular journey, I went to this very beautiful little town called Takachiho. Very lush, very green. There was a gorge, a big valley, right? Where there was a bridge way high up over a ravine and a waterway down below, which you could get in a boat and paddle through the waterway down deep in the ravine. And then there was another location where there was a cave, Amano Iwato Cave. This is the cave where the Japanese sun goddess Amaterasu went and hid her light from the world. And this is a sacred space where people can go. It is a very beautiful place. So I had been called to go to Takachiho and to go to this particular cave. So I was called to go look at those photos for some reason. I kept feeling like I wanted to use those photos and that content in what I was creating. So I go to the files from back then and pull up the photos, and there's pictures of the trail leading down. And I was super amazed because I didn't remember this point. But at the very bottom of the trail, there's this flowing, peaceful river. And from one side of the trail to the other is this very beautiful, simple, stone arched bridge that goes to the other side. And then there's a little trail with all these sacred stone stacks. There were thousands of them everywhere. And then there was a delineation of sacred space and areas to sit and meditate and just be in peace. I'd forgotten about the bridge. So I realized at that moment, I'd been currently having this visual of a bridge, right? Realizing I was on a floating bridge. And then I'm drawn to this place that I had visited 10 years before and find this bridge that I had totally forgotten existed that led over to where the cave was. So I thought, how interesting is that? So I go in and look into the story. I knew the general story. I knew she entered the cave. I knew eventually light was restored and she came out, okay? In looking deeper into the story though, I discovered some things. One, she's the sun goddess. So when she went into the cave, she withheld her light from the world. The world went into darkness. Why? Why did she enter the cave? She entered the cave because of a quarrel, series of events with her brother, the storm god, that were unfavorable. In looking deeper into the story, I discovered that there's several different versions of the story. However, it appears through most versions and through what I can tell in the translations from the Kojiki, and I'm Please forgive me if I'm pronouncing any of the Japanese language terms incorrectly. I am definitely not a native Japanese speaker, and I am learning. So there is the Kojiki is a document that is very old that describes the history of sacred events and stories pertaining to Japan's history. So in the story, the translations, from what I can tell, Amaterasu is a weaver. She's in charge of the celestial planes. She was born from the left eye of her father. She was given the celestial planes to protect them, to keep them in the divine true light. And she was given sacred beads and a mirror, and there were several implements that became part of her representation that became the sacred elements of Japan, part of the imperial regalia, from my understanding. So she is in her realm, and her brother, who is a little bit more mischievous, the storm god, wants to, he's been banished from that realm for acting out. And so he wants to come say goodbye to her. She doesn't trust him. He says, he kind of proposes this challenge so that if, however it comes out, that will bring trust and allow her to welcome him. And it seemingly from the story sounds like it worked out good. So she trusted him and, welcomed into the space, but he couldn't control his behavior, and he continued acting out of celebration, more and more mischievous. There was the damaging of the rice fields. There was something of flinging excrement around the space. There was just an in general disrespect of the sacred space and the order of the celestial planes. And so with it, Amaterasu kept allowing or forgiving or making excuses or just ignoring. I'm not really sure the words to exactly put to it, but there was this level of just, attempt to not put any energy to it, right? Just kind of ignore it and go about what she was doing and continue looming or continue weaving and continue her work, right? But her brother kept pushing and pushing and pushing the boundaries, right? And kept pushing it further and further and further until a final boundary was crossed. And this boundary involved the harm and it involved the mutilation of a sacred animal and ultimately the death of one of her weaving maidens. And she went into fear. Maybe it was by choice. There's questions with these stories as to exactly what the reasoning was there. However, in several of the translations that I read, it sounds like she became afraid and therefore she went into the cave. And she sealed the cave off to where her light could not get out, right? She contained it in there. So in that time, the world went into darkness and chaos ensued. There were attempts to allure her out, yet nothing worked. She had sealed the door closed. She was in the cave. She was in safe, sacred space. Her light contained. She was withholding, whether consciously or not, she was withholding her light, her divine purpose and reason for being from the world, right? Here's the thing. Light can't hide in the dark, right? That's the dark's job. Light can't do that. So when she did this, it threw all of the natural order out of balance. When the natural order gets thrown out of balance, it calls in a cosmic team and a cosmic emergency team of forces to come in and gather to look to say, what are we going to do? So the divine team had to create a divine intervention plan, an elaborate, intelligently created divine intervention plan. It was a team effort to allure her out. What was this plan? It first involved gathering together some implements, a tree, a sakaki tree, which is a type of an evergreen tree from my understanding. It involved the making of a giant mirror. It involved the making of strands or strings of these beautiful beads. It also required the gathering of blue and white cloth. It also required the summoning of all the cockerels, which were her roosters. It also required a performance artist. These preparations were created with all of the different components and the divine team, all of the myriad of gods, as the story uses those words. I'll use them as well because it explains it the best, came together and they devised this plan, gathered all these implements, and outside of the door of the cave that she had sealed off, they put the tree, they had put a giant mirror with all the strands and beads either hanging on the mirror or in the tree, with the blue and white cloth to symbolize sacred space. They built a makeshift stage. The dancer dressed in sensual clothing that revealed her body a little bit more and adorned herself in leaves and sacred branches and bits and pieces of the earth. There was we'll just use the word shaman, who did a prayer and spoke the words to allure her out. There was the different beings present that had specific skills like strength, grip, etc., to strategically be placed so that as this plan went forward, they would all be able to use the best of their skills to draw her out. This particular performance art ritual ended up needing to take place at dawn. The cockerels crow at dawn. Makes sense. We're trying to draw out the sun goddess. It makes sense that this would need to happen at dawn. The dancer was also the goddess of the dawn. As the dancer danced, her feet stomping on the earth, the cockerels crowing, there was a sound of, in one story I read, iron on rock making more rhythm and sound. So you could just imagine the thumping and the rhythm of the dancer's feet, the sound on the rocks, and the cockerels crowing. In addition, the more the dancer danced, the more entranced she got, and the more excitement began to grow, and the myriad of gods and people that were participating in this performance art ritual began to laugh and cheer on the dancer. There was merriment and noise, and inside the cave, Amaterasu got curious. She heard the commotion, and in one story I read, she thought that perhaps the world had went into chaos from her withholding her light. Maybe that's a moment of consciousness. Perhaps she had just been in her own sacred, safe space, protecting herself from the crazy behavior of her brother that she did not know how to handle or was afraid to confront, right? She had dimmed her light. She had not stood in her power to stand up to those incongruencies that were happening within her realm, okay? However, maybe this point where she started to hear this commotion and had that thought of, oh, maybe the world has went into chaos because I've withheld my life, is like a spark of consciousness coming in. Next, she continues to hear the commotion and the merriment happening, and she's getting curious. She had to take action. She had to take the first step over the ravine, meaning she had to crack the door open just a little bit. And in doing so, she was curious. What is going on? So she cracked it open just a little bit to be able to see what was happening. And as she did, the dancer, who's in trance, then says out loud, we're celebrating a god that has come that is more powerful and bright than you. And she hears this and she wants to now see, who is this god who has arrived that is more bright than I? And so she opens the door, and the mirror reflects to her her own reflection, which she thinks is this other God. But what she's seeing is her own luminosity shining back at her. And from this point, she opens the door all the way. She sees this reflection of her own light. The divine team kicks in. One person grabs her hand and draws her all the way out. Meanwhile, another one takes a rope and takes it behind her to delineate a sacred boundary that she cannot return and cross. And she then comes out and light is restored into the world. Balance and harmony is restored. So what is this about? Why am I sharing this story with you, right? Why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about shining your light, right? I started with saying in this whole podcast episode that shining your light is not always easy, right? We don't always know exactly what that looks like. We all have an inherent gift. We all have some reason or purpose why we're here, something we have come here to do, right? And there are so many ways that we get called in or drawn into places where we shut down, we close off, we buy into the illusion, the distortion that makes us think we're not safe, right? That makes us think that the gap is huge and that we cannot take the step, right? We get trapped within the fear, right? So in those moments, we then sometimes as conscious beings tend to think that we need to isolate ourselves and figure it out and do the work to consciously step out. It's true, we do. However, perhaps you've heard that we live in a world that we co-create our reality, correct? Which means that we do part and the universe does part, right? There's a part we put out and the energy coming in meets us halfway. And sometimes, sure, we get an internal spark, like my internal desire to go look at the photos from Amano Iwato Cave from 2014, right? I had no idea that was going to spark me into curiosity about this story. I felt the spark. I had to do the part. I could have ignored it. I could have said, nah, I don't want to go look at those photos. It's not gonna, there's no purpose for it. It's just gonna bring back a bunch of memories and longing to be somewhere that I really loved that I am not at right now. But I didn't. I allowed myself to go onto that journey, to look at it. And from that, it sparked this awareness of visions I've been having, a journey I've been on, a path I've been walking, and a point that I have come to, right? It's also showing me the ways that I have stepped into the cave, of having stepped into the cave at that point. And of course, there's been moments of shining ever since. However, there is a way that I'm being called forward, allured out to shine my light right now that I'm afraid of, that I've been trying to avoid. And this is one of them, making this podcast episode, right? This is not easy for me. Getting on a stage and dancing and performing is so comfortable and easy. I'm not afraid of that at all, right? I love it. It's my natural world, but it's also become my comfort zone. Yet doing this is not my comfort zone, right? Taking this kind of a message and sharing it with you and putting it together is not my comfort zone, right? There is some way right now that you are being allured out, right? This plan with Amaterasu required team effort from a divine team. It was a divine intervention plan, right? It took all of the most intelligent minds, masters of their trades, to come together to conspire in a way to appeal to her, to be curious enough, or to have that seed thought, that awareness, Perhaps all the commotion is happening because I have withheld my light. True, right? That actually is what was happening. That was a moment of consciousness. That seed thought was required for her to get then to the curiousness of what's going on, to open and look, to explore, to look beyond the first thought. True, that was the conscious seed thought. However, she had to take the next step. She had to explore and say, well, what is this exactly, right? Sort of like in the journey along the path where I explained that I had come to a ledge and I realized I could not turn back and there was a frightening ravine before me. I had to explore. I had to stick my toe out, stick my hand out, and feel the space to say, all right, well, what is here? I might not be seeing it. I might not know, but I've got to put all my senses into it and I got to explore all options, right? Because there is a way, right? I'm not trapped here, right? That's an illusion, right? There is a way. She had to explore. She had to check it out and see what it was about. And in doing so, that created the little minuscule opening that allowed the divine intervention plan to kick in and to become successful. A couple of things I love about this story is one, it required team effort. She could not do it alone, but neither did it work with just one person. It required a team of helpers, right? Second, it included a performance art ritual, creativity. And as part of this performance art ritual was laughter, music, dance, and yes, sacred trickery. Because many times when we are lodged into our rigid structures, we have put ourselves into our comfort zone. We are not going to let anybody in, right? We have shut down all the doors. We've closed them. We've locked them. We've blocked all the paths, right? We've sabotaged ourselves. We've built all these beliefs, structures, actions that keep us contained and locked in a rigid structure. We are not going to let anything in, right? Well, sometimes then, if that throws the divine order out of balance and the cosmic emergency team gets called in, it's going to require some form of trickery to get you out. It's like a reconnaissance mission. It's an emergency recovery mission. It is defibrillating you to get you to somehow start to have that seed thought and that spark of curiosity, but you got to take the first step. And it has to be one that comes from a genuine curiosity, right? It has to come from within, right? Because that which tries to allure us out, that is not rooted in that spark of divine truth from within, is false. And we've got to get really good at being able to discern the difference between the two, because one will pull us off center and lead us into dead ends and false starts and more challenge and loops and things not getting completed. Whereas the other leads us to a completion point. It leads us to an understanding. It leads us to growth. It leads us to moving into full awareness, and like the full moon, to full illumination. And let me remind you here that the full moon, the moon, shines the light of the sun. The moon draws in the darkness the sun's light out to shine. So as we move towards the full moon, how are you being allured out? Because the moon is waxing, right? And at that moment, when the full moon peaks, regardless of whether it's day or night in your life, regardless of where you are on the path, from having heard the call to being somewhere along the switchbacks to being standing on the ledge or on the floating bridge or in your cave, does not matter. What matters is that you tune in and ask yourself, what has went out of balance from you ignoring, dimming, hiding some part of your light, yourself, your gift, your authenticity from the world? What has went out of balance? Therefore, what is the cosmic divine team doing to try to get your attention to allure you out? I know you're having signs. I know this is speaking to you. And if it's not right now, if you're tuning in, it will in the coming days. You'll start to feel things, see things, think things, dream things, and you'll think, and if you tug on that just a little bit and explore it beyond its surface initial reaction, you'll discover something that may surprise you and illuminate your path and be that light that needs and is calling and wanting to emerge. I'm going to trust that I have made sense, that I've spoken this clearly, that I have shared the essence of what needs to be shared and expressed here in this moment. If this sparks an awareness, please share. I'd love to hear what is illuminated for you in this. If you are seeking guidance on your journey, remember, it takes a divine team. This is the work that I'm here to do. I'm here to help in this process with drawing out your radiance, your gifts, your purpose. And if you happen to be catching this before the next full moon on February 24th, you can join the full moon illumination activation ceremony. There'll be a link included to pre-register. And you can also check out my website at luminousLifeJourney.com. There is a wealth of fun experiences, virtual retreats, and other types of journeys and practices that you can engage in to help you along in your spiritual process. Thank you for watching Radiant Souls, episode 1. Please like this video and subscribe, as well as comment and share it with anyone. This is a new podcast, and whatever help you can offer to get this message out to anyone who might really resonate with this content would be great. I would be grateful for. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode. Take good care of yourself.